was not talking about whether he signed the document last week, but rather referring to the original Alien Enemies Act that was signed back in 1798. Obviously, he would not be able to sign that. But did Trump's remarks at all, I hear you, but do you think that they complicate the administration's legal standing? How do you think, what kind of impact do you think that has?
This is something we saw again and again in the first Trump administration, where the president actually said a lot of things that were really unhelpful to the positions the government was taking in court. Obviously, to him saying, kind of disowning this a little bit or kind of insulating himself from the invocation here does, of course, raise questions about whether this was a proper invocation and cast certainly something I would expect that the ACLU and the litigation going on right now in DC is going to be using against them, right? It just raises further questions about this. Of course, there's so many other questions about this. This is an authority that's supposed to be used during a foreign invasion or a declared war. There's no indication here that the Venezuelans that are being targeted were sent by the government. And then there were all these other questions about the manner in which this was done that the judge was raising on Friday, including that this was signed, no public announcement, unlike every other executive order we've seen. And that was done obviously explicitly so that they could try to get these flights up and in the air before anybody could rush to court and get an injunction against them.
And when asked a hypothetical question about whether he'd send another deportation flight to El Salvador amid all of this litigation, the president said that would be up to Secretary of State Marco Rubio. He says he's in charge here. Is that right? And what does that say to you?
Well, I mean, I think what's interesting about this is it's surprising to me that President Trump is kind of distancing himself from this. I don't know if he's getting worried about this episode politically or the situation, the fight with the judge. Obviously, he's been very aggressive in criticizing the judge to the point where Justice Roberts stepped in. So I don't know what his motivations are here, but I will say that the good thing and credit to the administration is that they have not done another flight while this fight is going on. I think there's been a lot of fear that we're diving headfirst into a constitutional crisis. And while the administration has been taking the legal position that the courts have no authority here because this is the president's invocation of his war powers, typically, yes, he gets great deference there, but they're taking the position that means it's completely unreviewable. And then that the decision as to who meets the criteria, who is an actual Tendra Aragua gang member, right, that's also unreviewable. Those are extreme positions, to be sure. But at the moment, they are honoring the injunction issued by the court. And I think that is obviously keeps us from having to, keeps this from becoming a full-fledged constitutional crisis.
And so there's all of this. There's the legal battle that is playing out that you just kind of walked everyone through there. I'm also just curious your thoughts as a former acting director of ICE, just about how this was handled and being able to invoke this act and not have, needing to use this to get these people out of the country. Do you think that that's right? You have to use this act in order to do it?
The biggest challenge he faces in any mass deportation writ large is the backlogs in the immigration courts. It is an inconvenience for ICE to have to go to the immigration courts. But ICE has proven for decades that we can get the worst of the worst off the streets, give people their day in court, still get them out of the country safely. We don't need to bypass due process. I would also say this, the men and women at ICE really are hardworking people who are doing a dangerous job trying to keep this country safe. But they do make mistakes. Rarely, but it happens. It happened when I was the acting director. It happened during my years at DHS. Sometimes mistakes are made. That's what the immigration courts do. They provide that extra layer of protection. So I don't think that we need to sit here and say this is a false choice between saying, are we going to allow gang members on our streets or are we going to give them a hearing? We can do both. We can keep gang members off our streets, get them out of our country, keep our country safe, but also do so in a manner that's consistent with our values as a nation and that provides that little extra layer of protection for those rare cases where we make a mistake and someone might not be a gang member or might have a valid claim to remain in the United States.
Lawyers for some of the migrants say that the government repeatedly pointed to tattoos and hand gestures as evidence that they're linked to those gangs. Do you think that is enough?
Proving gang membership is really tough. It's one of the hardest things ICE does. Fortunately, it's not something that comes up too often. Typically, when we're deporting someone, it's black and white questions, Jessica. Do they have a criminal conviction that takes away their visa? Do they have paperwork to begin with? Oftentimes, the gang membership issue is ancillary. It comes up in questions about whether someone's entitled to a bond hearing. It could come up in matters involving the exercise of discretion, saying, Judge, don't give this person discretion because they're a gang member. But It is very difficult. This is these. You are looking at tattoos. You're looking at gang gestures, signs potentially. You're looking at associations. It has always been a controversial topic, and I think that's what scares a lot of the people, the advocacy groups who are looking at this, saying of all the things ICE does, the hardest thing they do is proving someone is a gang member. The evidence is really squishy. Just again, very difficult to prove. So now, when you're saying we're making these determinations, or you're not entitled to any process, and not only that, Jessica, of course, I think one thing that's not getting as much attention, if you ask me, is the fact that we sent these people to El Salvador, where we had an agreement in place that they would be incarcerated in this, incredibly tough supermax kind of facility, right? So it's almost like, are we bypassing their Fifth and Sixth Amendment rights? So I think when you add all of that together, it really is a situation where it just doesn't make sense to me why we would go this route when we have this proven method of going through the immigration courts that is equally effective and doesn't compromise our public safety in any way.
All right, John Sandwick, thank you for your time. We really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Still to come, John King returns to battleground Wisconsin, where Democrats are once again worried about black voters.
Different languages, thank you. Yiddish and all.
Does anyone know of something that's even less popular than Trump right now?
I hate to say it, but probably the Democrats.
How much do they hate the Democrats? Here's our boy Harry again.
The majority of Americans hold an unfavorable or negative view of the Democratic Party at this point. All I can say is I'm a big fan of the oldies, so I'm going to quote Chubby Checker, how low can you go?
Nice. Well done.
I fucking love this guy. I love it.
Republicans aren't the only ones getting yelled at this week. People are just as mad, if not more so, at Democrats down in Maryland. Congressman Glenn Ivey heard from his voters.
We want you to show some of the backbone and strategic brilliance that Mitch McConnell would have in the minority.
You know you're in trouble when somebody say, why can't you be more like Mitch McConnell?
I honestly feel the same way. Our main problem is we're not willing to do dirt.
Yes. Yes. I think it's not the time for decorum. It's the time for, like, they go low, we go lower.
Also, they're so dumb. We gotta be able to outmaneuver them. How are we not outmaneuvering them? Just do a little dirt.
It does feel like we are in a bizarro world where the coyote keeps beating the roadrunner. It's like, well, this possibly can't work. They put the dynamite in their mouth, and you're like, how did it work?
Glenn Ivey's voters also did not stop there. So, go back to the last frame of that. I like how they let the black woman security guard touch her first. The other dude was like, hey.
And that woman turned to her like,
Michael and Jenny, watch the clip, and you tell me what's the story.
All right.
We got a plane taken off.
Okay, and then a judge is like, this is...
I'm mad at you, declaration.
Okay. Oh,
I'm going to burn
Nicolas
you.
Cage burns
And then the
us.
dick dance. They were throwing people on an airplane, sending them over to El Salvador. Donald Trump doing a dick dance about it. End of story.
Points.
Yes.
The boy who cried wolf.
I'm going to
wait
cry
until
wolf. We are in a constitutional
black
crisis.
and white.
When someone from The View...
Right, somebody who's sitting on a couch with Joy Behar all day is suddenly like, this shit is crazy.
I would just say the upside is there's some hope that the institutions will hold, and it doesn't necessarily feel like it because this is an absolute stress test for the democracy, like unlike one we probably haven't seen since the Civil War.
They said, oh, you got to turn these planes around that are flying to El Salvador. And Trump was like, what? I can't hear you. We're breaking up. What's up? Okay. So that feels like a constitutional crisis to me when the Trump administration is just ignoring court orders.
He has no concept of the president shouldn't do this. That doesn't even cross his mind. It's Donald Trump-id that is functioning out of the Oval Office. And that's what scares the shit out of people.
Yes. Last weekend, Trump invoked an obscure 18th century wartime law called the Alien Enemies Act to deport hundreds of Venezuelans to El Salvador without due process. While Trump was deporting the Venezuelans, federal judge James Boasberg ruled the deportations were possibly illegal and, quote, explicitly told the government to turn around any aircraft that had already departed the country if it was still in the air. Now, that part I'm kind of with Trump on. These planes today, if you get them in the air and it's going one way, just let it go.
I love what that reveals about Roy's understanding of planes.
Yeah. You tell the plane, this is where we're going, this is how we getting there. And the plane be like, cool.
Yeah. It's like when you push chicken on a microwave. You already pushed Cleveland. Just leave it alone.
You can't put beef in a microwave after you hit the chicken.
No.
You do that?
No. Absolutely not.
Now, to clear up some of the confusion, Judge Boasberg asked the White House for detailed flight logs and more information about the people on the planes. Question, why would the judge want more information about the Venezuelans who were being deported to El Salvador?
To make sure that they actually had a trial, that it wasn't just done on like vibes.
Instead of giving a federal judge the information he requested, Donald Trump posted on Truth Social, quote, "This radical left lunatic of a judge, a troublemaker, an agitator who's sadly appointed by Barack Hussein Obama should be impeached." And then House Republicans did this.
Texas Congressman Brandon Gill today introducing articles of impeachment against Judge James Boasberg.
Yeah, don't be scared, Judge. That first impeachment's the hard one, but you... Sources say the Trump administration is considering invoking state secrets privilege to avoid giving information about Venezuelan deportees. Who on the plane? Shh. Now, even though impeaching a federal judge who disagrees with the president may trigger a different constitutional crisis, here's how Team Trump is defending the move.
We have judges who are acting as partisan activists.
And this has been a pattern with these liberal judges. They're meddling in our government.
What is it about Judge Boasberg's history that would suggest that he is a partisan leftist radical?
He went to a Dave Matthews concert.
Judge Boasberg's leftist credentials include ordering the release of Hillary's emails, ruling against the release of Trump's tax returns, and most damning of all, he was once law school roommates with Supreme Court Justice Brett Kavanaugh. Oh,
he's one of them.
That's a leftist. But we do have tape on Kavanaugh speaking about Boasberg. Here's Judge Kavanaugh describing his time living with Judge Boasberg.
I liked beer.
Can I at least point out, Boasberg was not appointed by Obama. He was originally appointed by George W. Bush.
Yes, he was.
He was elevated by Obama.
Yeah, it's like a double appointee situation.
That's right.
Yeah, man. So far, the courts have blocked executive orders to freeze foreign aid, ban transgender people from the military, and 2 judges have blocked DOJ's mass firings of probationary federal workers. Earlier this week, the Department of Justice argued, quote, Trump could fire all agency heads who are women or over 40. Here's the head of the DOJ, Attorney General Pam Bondi, seen here being a woman over 40. You are in danger, girl. They're trying to get you, Pam.
Also, you didn't have to tell us Pam Bondi was 40. There's no Pam under 45 years old. If she wants to keep her job, she has to change her name to, like, Michaela.
What is Elon Musk doing to make this whole constitutional crisis more efficient?
Ketamine.
Here's CNN Caitlin Collins on what Elon has been up to.
The New York Times is reporting tonight that Elon Musk is now donating the maximum that is allowed by law to the campaigns of all of these Republican members that you see here on screen of Congress who have expressed support for judicial impeachments.
When do we riot? When do we...
I know what, well, here's what I've been doing. I've been going around to random Tesla dealers and just lighting cars on fire.
Say that,
I just realized there's a good chance I'll get arrested for saying that I was lighting cars on fire at Tesla dealership.
Welcome.
I didn't do that. And I wouldn't do that.
We come back to the next segment, and there's an empty chair right there.
We'll be right back.
Musk speaking in 2017.
I think we're still on track for being able to go cross-country from LA to New York by the end of the year, fully autonomous.
Okay, so a car, by the end of the year, you're saying that someone's going to sit in a Tesla without touching the steering wheel, tap in New York, off it goes, won't have to ever touch the wheel by the end of 2017.
Yeah, essentially November or December of this year, we should be able to go from, all the way from a parking lot in California to a parking lot in New York, no controls touched at any point during the entire journey.
Amazing.
Imagine if you, imagine if you were in the audience at that event, looking back now in 2025 and realizing that you might have been one of the people who applauded that. Did you buy stock too? Yeah, I love the part.
Funnel it to religious-based schools, and there's that. On top of that, and this is something that I just want to make it really clear, you know, I didn't grow up with a lot of money. I'm just being honest with you guys, and I've told this guys, and I write about it in my book. And if you know my story, I lost my family at the end of the Vietnam War. And one thing that I learned in my life is that if you don't have a lot of money, or just any person at all, your worth is in your word, right? Like who you are as a person, how you treat people. And I'm bringing that up because, like, this is the headline today: Europe military powers work on a 5 to 10 year plan to replace U.S. and NATO. Basically, with someone like a Trump or a Musk, these kind of people, they don't keep their word. Like their word is worthless. And you know, this is something that I believe in. If you want to be an honest, trustworthy person, you keep your word, right? These people, to these kind of people, the word means nothing. And so already Europe is trying to, like, oh my God, what are we gonna do? We gotta figure out, you know, how to move on without the USA. Canada, this is Chrystia Freeland. She wrote a piece recently and gave a speech basically saying, hey, Canada and USA have a long history of being partners. Let's not break that. Unfortunately, the USA is just not trustworthy these days with Trump and Musk. It's just being honest about this stuff. People have been asking about this. I had a chance to look through this stuff. If you don't know, this was just today. Germany updates U.S. travel advice after 3 citizens are detained. So basically, Germany is warning their people to be careful if you travel to the USA. It's not safe. That's basically what it boils down to. There was a piece in the New York Times here. This just came out about a week ago. There were tourists who were arrested at the border, strip search. They were detained for quite a long period. I think one was 9 days, and another was like 14 days, something like that. And the border people wouldn't really make it clear why they're detaining them. And they would just like handcuff them to like a bench for some period. The other one was put in solitary confinement. I read through this stuff. I'll just say this: it's very upsetting. I'll just say that it's very upsetting. And I think, because I've read these reports about this before, that the way the Musk and Trump do this kind of stuff is they're most likely. Now, I don't know in this situation, but I'll just say I've read reports on this stuff, is that they're most likely giving border agents or whatever like incentives to arrest whatever people, meaning that, like, hey, if you, because I saw reports before, like, hey, if you get your quota of deporting, 10 people a day or 90 people a day or whatever, you get a bonus. Like that's like when you put kind of incentives on that kind of stuff, you're going to get a lot of bad behavior in, border agents, police, etc. If you guys understand what I'm saying, like think of it this way: if, like I said, hey, you have to find 10 people that are speeding, right? Just for example, and the police. And so then, police are like going to maybe fudge the rules a bit and stuff like that. That's the kind of stuff that we're looking at. And then we're getting reports that, the Trump Musk people want to come search your house without a warrant. I mean, that's like to any just regular person, you should understand that this is extremely alarming. So I have to break down all the stuff to put it all in context. It's not just the Social Security messing with your money. It's not just, messing with you at the border. It's not just messing with your education. It's like all of it. And frankly, as it boils down to, they want to, keep you dumb, lock you up whenever they want, and take your money. And it's awful. This whole thing is awful. And I think it's important to stay informed in this stuff and, call it out when you see it so more people know what's going on, and don't be passive in this kind of stuff. So I do.
The most important advisors are an imaginary couple that lives in his head, according to an 2007 profile by The New Yorker. Quote, Schumer says that he is a...
And thank you for streaming with us. I'm DeMarco Morgan, and welcome to ABC News Live Weekend. Let's take a look at your top headlines right now. We start off with President Donald Trump signing an executive order to get rid of the Department of Education. The president's order directing Education Secretary Linda McMahon to take as many steps as permitted by law without congressional action to dismantle the Department of Education. The move fulfills Trump's campaign promise of returning education power and decisions to the states, but the department does not set school curriculums. That's already up to the states and individual school districts. A major escalation in Israel's war with Hamas, the IDF launching a new ground operation in Gaza and issuing mandatory evacuation orders. This all comes after Israel vowed to strike Hamas targets until all the hostages are home. The Hamas-run Gaza Health Ministry says hundreds have been killed since the ceasefire ended. More than 130 children alone on Monday, and UNICEF calling it the deadliest day for children since the war began. Families of the remaining hostages fear the attacks on Gaza put their loved ones at further grave risks. And back here in the U.S., astronauts Sonny Williams and Butch Wilmore are finally home after their unexpected 9-month stay in space. A pod of dolphins welcomed the SpaceX capsule as it splashed down off the coast of Florida. The crew was assisted out of the capsule as their bodies reacclimate to Earth's gravity, and they had to undergo medical testing before reuniting with their families. And NASA says after everything they've been through, the crew will have some much-needed time off, and boy, do they deserve it.
By the Joint Chiefs at the Pentagon, and potentially been given access to a presentation detailing war strategy with China. Now, once that report went out, we were told by two sources, ABC News briefed by two sources, that the plans then changed, and that's when Elon Musk was not included in that meeting. Instead, he met with Pete Hegseth in his office with a number of DOD officials. It was not the same as originally kind of forecasted, but this has been something that both Trump, Secretary Hegseth, and also Elon Musk have pushed back vehemently on. Elon Musk even suggesting that those leakers, those tipsters, should be prosecuted.
Well, speaking of Elon Musk, let's hang here because President Trump is also weighing in on some strong words on the wave of vandalism that we've seen against Tesla. Just yesterday, we saw a Tesla charging station in Fargo destroyed as well. What can you tell us about that?
Well, certainly in the recent weeks, there's been an outrage towards Tesla, folks who are taking their rage out on Tesla, trying to show some sort of resistance to Elon Musk's actions, setting Teslas on fire, targeting dealerships. Well, the president has been pretty forceful in coming out and saying that these protests are essentially terrorism in his eyes. He actually went as far to say that he believes that these actions are worse than the actions committed on January 6th.
Yeah, but then also suggesting that they be sent to prison in El Salvador. Of course, that's a story that we're keeping an eye on as well. Alex Brachet, thank you for breaking that down. We're going to talk politics here still. Bernie Sanders and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez leading a crowd of more than 30,000 people at a rally in Denver. As part of a national fight, the oligarchy tour, the progressive lawmakers are blasting President Trump's plan to reshape the government, claiming that Trump is moving the country toward oligarchy and authoritarianism, and criticizing the lack of current leadership within the Democratic Party. All of this comes as the state of the Democratic Party continues to come into question, with the stakes now at an all-time high, as we've seen, as the GOP moves fast to advance President Trump's policy agenda. Progressive Democrat and former New York City Mayor Bill de Blasio joining me now for months. So good to have you here in studio, Mayor. I want you to give us a state of the Democratic Party here, because for months they've really been struggling to coalesce behind a sharp political strategy here before the presidential election, but many would argue, especially now after the election, and now without control over the House or the Senate. I'm curious, how does the party move forward here? How can they unite?
Morgan, first of all, we have to be honest about our own mistakes, because I think we lost the 2024 election when we could have won it. I don't think our party or our candidate showed enough empathy with the pain that Americans were feeling post-COVID, with all the inflation, and the fact that working people, middle-class people, feel like they've been going backwards for a long time. So that's our fault. I think we left the door wide open for Donald Trump. But even with that, it was a very, very close election. And you can see it in the numbers in the House and Senate and all around the country. This thing could have been won. Right now, I think what Bernie Sanders and AOC are doing is right on the money. I think it's actually kind of a back to the future. This takes us to where the party discussion was almost a decade ago, when Bernie Sanders challenged Hillary Clinton. And you saw out of nowhere, he got this massive support. I think he represents the true voice of the Democratic Party in many ways. I think AOC is obviously one of our most admired leaders. There's a reason you see 40,000 people come out. That's amazing, because they're speaking authentically to the desire to fight back against the extremism of Donald Trump and Elon Musk. They're, you know, when they say oligarchy, let's think about it. The Trump administration is about to give away vast billions to billionaires. Americans don't want that.
I'm only so tall, which is not tall at all. Okay, I'm gonna do one more loop. Whoa, sorry.
And take a few moments to read the Constitution.
Today, after hosting a rally at UNC in Greeley, Senator Bernie Sanders and Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez moved on to Civic Center Park in Denver. And that's where we find 9 News reporter Ria Jha. Ria, the crowd was certainly energized tonight.
Yeah, people started showing up 3 hours in advance. A line just to get in wrapped around the entire block of Civic Center Park. And we spoke to people while they were showing up about why they came. And they said they were fed up with the current administration and that they needed to hear a message like this.
In front of this crowd, these two didn't need any introduction.
In the hundreds of rallies that I have done, we have never, ever had a rally as large as this.
Thousands of people flooded the Civic Center to see Independent Senator Bernie Sanders and Democratic Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, drawn by a sense of urgency, fear, and frustration.
Well, the reason I'm here is I don't like the way this country is going right now.
Even before they spoke, the crowd knew what they were hoping to hear: accountability for the issues they care about.
I'm actually a psychiatric nurse practitioner, and I have so many patients who have Medicaid or Medicare. I'm afraid for the country.
On stage, AOC wasted no time challenging not only Republicans, but her own party.
And this isn't just about Republicans. We need a Democratic Party that fights harder for us, too.
Neither Sanders nor AOC spoke directly to Denver-specific issues like immigration enforcement in the city or the rising cost of living, instead focusing on national themes like raising the minimum wage and taking on billionaires.
We will not allow America to become an oligarchy. This nation was built by working people. And we're not going to let a handful of billionaires run the government.
Both leaders finishing off with a reminder to the people: the power is with them.
No, it's not Bernie. Not Bernie. I got bad news for you. It's you.
I want you to look at every level of office around you and support Democrats who actually fight, because those are the ones that can win against Republicans. We are going to get through this.
Was one of many stops.
Greatest fight was George Foreman's most devastating. The rumble in the jungle humbling by Muhammad Ali was so brutal, so unexpected.
Yeah, it was like I was mugged in the jungle. I went there with 2 title belts. I came home with none. It was really strange. I thought I'd knock him out in 1 or 2 rounds, but about the 3rd round, I'd hit him, and he fell on me. I thought, that's it. And he started screaming, "That all you got, George? Show me something." And I knew then I was in the wrong place at the wrong time.
But it became the making of a sporting giant's reinvention, redefined by redemption and resilience. After growing up in the segregated American South, Olympic gold was won in 1968. Knocking out Joe Frazier in 1973 made him heavyweight champion of the world and the most feared and formidable of fighters. Until that unbeaten record ended in the iconic bout with Ali. A night in Kinshasa that transcends boxing. But from the animosity, a friendship blossomed.
We became the best of friends. And he would talk and all of his exploits, but he didn't want to bring up about him beating me. I said, "Yeah, you defeated me." And boy, I fell in love with the guy. We were, even till, I still miss him today.
Foreman had turned to religion. He was ordained as a minister when Ali inspired a comeback. The belts were reclaimed at 45, becoming the oldest man to wield a world heavyweight title by beating Michael Moorer. The same year, 1994, his name was put to this.
Steak? Sure. Paninis? Easy.
Finding a new level of fame with his lean, mean grilling machine. and earning a $200 million fortune far eclipsing fighting earnings, showing second acts are possible.
Great tasting, healthier food in minutes.
Announcing his death, age 76, Foreman's family remembered a life marked by unwavering faith, humility and purpose. A humanitarian, an Olympian and two-time heavyweight champion of the world, he was deeply respected.
The Israeli-Lebanese border saw the heaviest exchange of attacks since Israel and the militant group Hezbollah agreed to a ceasefire 4 months ago. Early this morning, Israel struck Lebanon in retaliation for rockets that targeted Israel. Lebanese officials said 2 people were killed, including a child. Now the Israeli army says it's launching a second wave of strikes in Lebanon. Hezbollah has denied any involvement in the rocket attacks. They say they are committed to the truce. This comes as Israel says it will intensify its offensive in Gaza until Hamas releases the remaining Israeli hostages. Palestinian officials say Israeli airstrikes overnight killed at least 9 people, including 3 children. They estimate that 600 people in Gaza have been killed since Israel relaunched the war earlier this week. Joseph Fetterman is a news director for the Associated Press covering Israel, the Palestinian territories, and Jordan. Let's start on the border with Lebanon. What's behind this renewed rocket firing from Lebanon?
It's not entirely clear what sparked this. What's interesting, for the time being, it appears to be some sort of one-off incident. Nobody's claimed responsibility for this rocket fire. It most likely is connected to what's going on to Gaza because that has raised tensions across the region, but nobody is claiming responsibility. Hezbollah says it didn't do it. The Lebanese government is urging restraint. So that is an indication that today will be a one-off incident. So it's hard to understand what the motivations were behind here, but it does look like the Lebanese side at least is trying to lower the tension level.
And let's turn to Gaza now. How has Hamas responded to this renewed fighting in Gaza?
Hamas has been criticizing the Israeli renewal of the attacks. There have been a handful of rocket attacks at Israel, but for the time being, Hamas is kind of keeping a low profile, calling for restraint, calling for a renewal of negotiations. So Hamas is not looking for a renewal of this war. The Israelis, however, appear to be barreling ahead with it for the time being.
And what's the status of the talks on phase 2 of the ceasefire in Gaza?
Well, that's the issue here. Israel made it clear, even while the ceasefire was in place, that it did not want to go to phase 2. Phase 2 means talking about the end of the war. It means talking about withdrawing all Israeli troops. Israel doesn't want to talk about those issues right now. Israel wanted to extend that initial ceasefire, that exchange of prisoners for hostages without ending the war altogether. So phase 2 has now been pushed aside. The ceasefire appears to be in tatters, and there are efforts behind the scenes to get that ceasefire back in place. But for the time being, Israel is moving ahead. And you don't see any calls from the White House, from Trump, the Trump administration, to put the brakes on this operation. So Israel is going to keep on moving ahead with this, believing that this military pressure is the best way to bring those hostages home.
No calls for the White House, but I know that earlier this week there were public demonstrations after Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu resumed the fighting in Gaza. Where is the sense of the Israeli public on this?
There are deep divisions in Israeli society. The government, this is a very hardline government, but the Israeli public, large parts of the Israeli public, at least half, possibly more, according to opinion polls, don't want to see a resumption of fighting. They believe that diplomacy and negotiations and continuing the ceasefire is the best way to bring the hostages home. They believe that if the fighting continues, that Hamas is only going to take a harder line, and this actually reduces the chances of people coming home. Remember, the hostages who were freed during that first phase, many of them came back looking in very poor condition. They had lost a lot of weight, emaciated, and they're telling stories about very harsh conditions in captivity. People were chained, kept underground for months at a time, not seeing any sunlight. And this has generated lots of sympathy for the remaining hostages. So wide parts of the Israeli public want to see the government dealing and not fighting. And that's why you see thousands and even tens of thousands of people taking to the streets right now.
Joseph Fetterman of the Associated Press, thank you very much for walking us through that.
Thank you.
Australia is looking to boost the protection of its vast coastline by arming its soldiers with anti-ship missiles and advanced targeting radars. Now, this comes on the heels of 3 Chinese warships taking part in live fire drills off the eastern coast of Australia. Now, the ships passed about 200 miles from Sydney and then moved through international waters for weeks. For more on this topic, let's bring in Charles Edel. He's the Australia Chair and Senior Advisor at the Centre for Strategic and International Studies, joining us from Canberra. Good morning to you. It's probably late afternoon over there. But how big of a threat does Australia perceive China to be right now?
Well, the challenge from China is looming large because it comes in the context of the largest buildup by a military since World War II, if not ever, which is what China's been undertaking. What you just referred to, Errol, happened when 3 Chinese warships transited off of Sydney, but made a drive-by of Australia. They circumnavigated all of Australia. And the most concerning aspect of this was they conducted live fire drills with no pre-notification. In fact, the Australian government found out about this because commercial airlines, Virgin Australia, signaled this into the government. More than 50 commercial airlines had to divert. Now, when we step back from this, this is a clear message from the Chinese that they're there, that they are projecting power. This is an unprecedented display of their warships moving further south and was meant to both intimidate, send a message, and announce that they are there on a much more regular basis and probe Australia's reaction.
How else will Australia respond in the long term? We mentioned on the short term some of the drills that they may have their soldiers perform, and how is it increasing its influence overall in the region there?
Yeah, it's a great question. So as the security environment has degraded over the last several years, we've heard from senior Australian officials over the last several years of both parties that Australia now faces the most challenging security environment that it has in multiple decades, possibly extending all the way back to World War II. So what we've seen is simultaneously an effort to double down on its alliance with the United States, the AUKUS Pact, where the United States is going to help Australia acquire, maintain, and field nuclear-powered submarines as part of the answer to this, as indeed is a larger buildup of defense capabilities, in addition to a larger diplomatic presence in the region that's meant to counter the more harmful effects of Chinese expansion into the region.
Yeah, we'll continue to watch all the developments here. Charles Edel, thank you so much. Joining us from Australia, 10:36 in the evening. That's not a live picture behind you for any viewers who might get confused.
Operational after a power outage crippled one of the world's busiest airports. A fire at an electrical substation cut power to the airport for most of yesterday and caused widespread chaos and cancellations. More than 1,300 flights to and from Heathrow were affected, and it disrupted travel for more than 200,000 passengers. Lee Kanairi is at Heathrow. Lee, good morning.
In response to a wave of rockets from across the border. 2 people, including a child, were killed in Lebanon in what is the heaviest exchange of fire since Israel and Hezbollah brokered a ceasefire in November. The militant group has denied responsibility for the rocket attack on Israel. It comes a day after Israel said that it would ramp up military operations in Gaza until Hamas releases the 59 hostages it still holds. Tens of thousands of Israelis have protested their government's decision to restart the war in Gaza, as well as moves to sack the country's top security official. Our Middle East correspondent Eric Torchik has the story from Jerusalem.
Months of sustained protests have failed to move Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Now people are being asked to consider mass acts of civil disobedience. Already, a growing number of reservists are refusing to return to duty, questioning how the war is being fought and why.
The Israeli government went back to war with Gaza when they're not going to the second phase of the deal, and by that they're sending the hostages to death, and we're here to say that there's no way we're letting that happen.
Majority in Israel wants this war to end, wants our brothers and sisters, our moms, our dads, the hostages being held in Gaza. We want them back home.
These protesters are calling for Israel to end its renewed attacks on Gaza and secure a deal to release the remaining 59 hostages. But many people are also angry at the government's decision to sack its most senior security official, Ronen Bar, the director of the Israel Security Agency. They suspect government corruption or foreign interference. Mr. Bar was investigating staff within Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's office for improper dealings with the state of Qatar when he was removed. The High Court has ordered that his dismissal be suspended, and if the government ignores that, as it has indicated, it will plunge Israel into a constitutional crisis. Months of protest have failed to make an impact on the Prime Minister, so Israelis are being told to consider mass acts of civil disobedience. Already, a growing number of reservists are refusing to return to duty, questioning how the war is being fought and why. But the government is disregarding this public sentiment in its decision to increase the deployment in Gaza and continue its campaign of airstrikes and artillery strikes. It could also be facing a renewal of conflict in the north in Lebanon. 3 rockets were intercepted over Lebanon on Saturday morning local time, with the Israeli Air Force striking a number of targets and killing Lebanese in response. The militant group Hezbollah, with whom Israel has had a ceasefire for the last 3 months, said it was not responsible, but Israel nevertheless bombed Hezbollah targets and members inside Lebanon. This is all occurring while more ballistic missiles come towards Israel, fired by the Houthis in Yemen, and Hamas, for the first time in months, has resumed firing rockets from inside Gaza. So it's going in a direction that the Israeli public generally don't want. And Israel is looking at a very difficult situation. All this is unwelcome news for a population that's tired of war. People want a ceasefire deal and the release of hostages, and they say they'll keep protesting until they get it. But they may...
Between Israel and Hamas, 400 people have died in Gaza, according to the Hamas-run health ministry. And as Lisa Rosner reports, the new attacks have sparked protests and concern in our area.
We demand liberation!
Hundreds attended a rally in Times Square Tuesday night.
So we're here to demand a ceasefire again. So much bloodshed, all paid for by our tax dollars.
A small counter-protest drawing attention to the 59 hostages held by Hamas.
I want my sisters and brothers home, and they're, again, going through unbearable conditions.
Explosions could be seen in Gaza early Tuesday. In the Gaza Strip, Palestinians searching through rubble for victims. The Israeli Defense Forces says it's targeting senior Hamas leaders and urging residents to flee to shelters in Gaza City and Khan Yunis.
From now on, Israel will act against Hamas with increasing intensity. And from now on, negotiations will only take place under fire.
The strikes
doing whatever it wants in Gaza, are okay with giving this carte blanche. The other dimension is you have a Trump administration now willing to give Israel the heaviest bombs in its arsenal, the 2,000-pound bombs, that as soon as it's used, it creates a fireball of 3,500 degrees Fahrenheit, and it kills people within the radius of 350 meters. And now Israel is raining those on Gaza again like candy, with a White House that is willing to whitewash Israel's genocide in Gaza in real time. It's absolutely insane and shameful what's going on in this regard, and even more shameful how it's being covered up, how Israel is being given the benefit of the doubt. So you see it in headlines where basically it says that that number of people in Gaza were killed despite the ceasefire. It does not actively call out Israel for violating, destroying, obliterating the ceasefire.
Russian forces rushed to counter a Ukrainian offensive, a humiliation for President Putin. NBC News was the first US news organization to reach the former front line in the Kursk region. On the outskirts of the village of Koreneva, a gas station where we were told the bodies of Russians and Ukrainians piled up. 250 killed in an hour, witnesses say. We drive on to a destroyed hotel, Russia's military is still here in force, still fighting just miles away. And we find US military hardware incinerated. This remains of an American Humvee is as far as the Ukrainians got. For 7 months, they held hundreds of miles of territory in that direction. It was all for nothing. Further still, this is where Ukrainian forces held their ground. The battle to evict them, inflicting terrible losses. Houses destroyed. This woman, whose husband stayed through it all, tells us...
Yes, he did not leave. He stayed. He had to hide from drones. It was very, very scary. They were bombing. You see, that's what's happening here. And there were missiles flying and drones were dropping shells. So it was very scary and dangerous here.
And in the center of this village, divided by war, one of many buildings hit. As President Trump and Putin discussed an end to the conflict, one military volunteer who carried bodies from this rural battlefield tells us he's ready for peace. Few Russians will concede any responsibility for what happened these past 3 years. Criticizing Moscow's role in the conflict is illegal. Ukrainians have destroyed Russian villages. Russians have destroyed many Ukrainian villages. Yet some Russians say, keep fighting.
Our biggest adversaries.
Only because it's meant to be our 51st state. And
okay, but
but listen to this for a second.
We need their territory. They have territorial advantage. We're not going to let them get close to China.
Look,
right?
I deal with every country, indirectly or directly. One of the nastiest countries to deal with is Canada. The people that, now this was Trudeau, the people that good old Justin, I call him Governor Trudeau, his people were nasty. And they weren't telling the truth. They never told the truth. You know that...
I guess I'm somewhat, I guess shouldn't be surprised, but his one take on anybody that he doesn't like is they're nasty.
Yes.
And his audience, his cult base, like if I liked somebody and they always had the exact same comeback for everything, I would grow bored of that person. I'm just surprised that people are not bored of him, despite, okay, let's say they like him for the cruelty.
Gave these back-to-back gestures that people are saying mimicked a Nazi salute. You see it there. Elon Musk has not directly addressed this, but he has appeared to edit out that gesture from the video that he posted on X, the platform he, of course, owns. Help us understand what transpired. Thank you.
Oh, careful. Careful with that salute.
It wasn't even like a subtle, like a wave, like one of these, like a...
It's okay, it's good to be proud of German culture, German values, and not to lose that in some sort of multiculturalism that dilutes everything.
That's what a Nazi would say.
We don't want Italy as a culture to disappear. We don't want France as a culture to disappear. I think we have to have maintain the sort of reasonable cultural identity of the various countries. Or they simply will not be those countries.